He walked in just looking for a friend, but what he found was a ghost from his past. A 1-year-old German shepherd pressed against cold steel bars, crying like he'd seen a ghost. Except the ghost was real, a retired firefighter who had lost everything: his wife, his health, and the one dog that helped him hold on. Until today. What happens when two broken hearts recognize each other after months of silence? What happens when love refuses to forget? This is the story of Max, and it will remind you that even after the worst storms, some souls still find their way home. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments below. And if you believe in second chances, if you believe animals deserve more than cages and pain, hit that subscribe button. Because this story will stay with you long after the final frame. Crescent Falls, Colorado. Early winter, air crisp with frost, sky pale and quiet. The first snow hadn't yet arrived, but the cold was already biting through the mountain town of Crescent Falls. Outside Willow Ridge Animal Shelter, the wind whipped softly across gravel paths, and brittle pine needles scraped against fences in hollow rhythm. The shelter sat quietly on the edge of town, where pastures gave way to foothills, and silence often lingered like a memory too stubborn to leave. Ethan Callahan, 68, pulled into the gravel lot, the engine of his faded blue truck groaning as he shut it off. He stepped out slowly, hands shoved into the pockets of his heavy canvas jacket. He moved like a man who used to carry ladders up burning stairwells and now counted his steps with care. His hair was silver gray, trimmed short above his ears. Lines cut deeply across his brow and cheeks, the kind that only grief and time could etch. But it was his eyes, muted steel blue and distant, that told the true story. The loss of his wife Nancy, the heart attack that nearly took him weeks later, and the echo of a dog's bark that still haunted his dreams. He hadn't planned to come here, but the silence in his home had become unbearable. Something inside him, it might have been Nancy's memory, or maybe just an ache he didn't know how to name, had whispered, "Try." The shelter door creaked open, and a burst of warmth and noise greeted him. Inside, the sounds of barking and the scent of antiseptic hung in the air. Behind the counter stood Lily Monroe, 29, tall with a strong frame and gentle movements. Her chestnut hair was pulled back into a ponytail, her eyes kind but wary, like someone who'd once trusted too quickly and paid for it. A single mother and the manager of the shelter, Lily had learned to balance efficiency with empathy. "Morning," she said, offering a practiced but sincere smile. "Looking to adopt?" "Maybe," Ethan replied, his voice gravelly, unused to conversation. "Just seeing." She nodded and gestured toward the kennels. "Feel free to look. Holler if you need anything." Ethan shuffled down the row, past restless tails and hopeful eyes. Some dogs barked, others whined. One sat at the back of its kennel with eyes too old for its years. But it wasn't until he reached kennel number 7 that Ethan stopped. Inside, curled into himself like a question mark, lay a young German shepherd. His coat was black and tan with a pale stripe down his neck. He had strong shoulders, though thinner than they should have been, and one floppy ear that gave him a lopsided charm. His nameplate read simply, "Max, male, approx. 1 year." Max didn't lift his head immediately, but when he did, when those sharp, intelligent eyes met Ethan's, the change was instant. The dog froze, then stood, then rushed forward to the bars with a sound like a gasp breaking into a cry. He whined sharply, tail slamming against the wall. He pressed his nose to the bars, pawing frantically, his whole body vibrating with a kind of desperate disbelief. Then the sound changed into something softer, a trembling whimper, a sob, if dogs could cry. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. He stepped forward, kneeling stiffly, and reached a weathered hand toward the bars. "Max," he whispered, "it's you, isn't it?" The shepherd whined louder, licking Ethan's fingers through the cage. He pressed himself against the gate, tail still wagging, as if to merge his body into Ethan's shadow. His cries had quieted into trembling whines, soft, heart-wrung notes of recognition. From across the corridor, Lily had stopped walking. Jason, her 6-year-old son, stood beside her. The boy was small for his age, with tousled sandy blonde hair and a gap-toothed smile that rarely appeared around strangers. But today, he held her hand tightly and stared at the old man and the crying dog. "Mom," Jason asked in a whisper, tugging at her sleeve. "Why's that dog crying when he saw that man?" Lily didn't answer right away. She was watching too. The way Max had come alive, the way the old man's shoulders had sagged, not from weight, but from recognition. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't just an old dog seeing a friendly face. This was a bond reawakening. She finally knelt beside Jason and whispered back, "Because sometimes the heart remembers before the mind understands." She watched Max press his head against the bars again, eyes never leaving the man he clearly knew. And she realized what had happened. This wasn't just an adoption. This was a return. The warmth of the reunion still lingered in the air, like morning fog that refused to lift. Max lay on a thick blue mat in the shelter's quiet visiting room, his eyes watching every move Ethan made as though fearful this moment might vanish. Ethan sat in a low vinyl chair across from him, his hands resting on his knees, his back slightly hunched. The old firefighter's face was quieter now, less guarded, but marked with the hesitation of a man facing a memory he both craved and dreaded. Lily Monroe stood just outside the doorway, holding a slim folder in her hand. She had pulled Max's intake file after witnessing the overwhelming reaction between man and dog. Now, flipping through the faded pages and the scanned intake form, she looked for something, anything, that could confirm what her heart already knew. Her eyes caught the note scribbled in hurried cursive. Mail, approx 1 yard, found tied to utility post behind St. Mary's. No chip detected at intake. But then she paused. A second note had been added in a different handwriting. Dr. Ramirez's, their part-time vet who came in on Thursdays. Weak signal detected. Possible expired chip. Recommend scan while our upgraded reader. Her brow furrowed. She glanced down the hallway. They had one of those upgraded readers, a portable one, kept locked in a drawer. She would check it. Soon. Inside, Ethan finally broke the silence. "Her name was Nancy," he said softly, his gaze on Max, though his mind had slipped years back. "We were married 42 years, long enough to know every cough, every laugh. But when the cough didn't stop, we both knew." He smiled bitterly. "Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Doctor gave her 6 months. She made it 8. Jason was seated on the floor a few feet from Max, carefully holding a squeaky toy shaped like a duck. He didn't squeeze it, just turned it over in his small hands. His cheeks were pink from earlier play, and his voice, when he finally spoke, was soft. "Is that when you got Max?" Ethan looked at the boy, this quiet child with eyes too old for 6. He nodded. "Nancy wanted one last dog, said she didn't want her last days to be quiet. Said a house without paws was a house without a heartbeat. I found Max in a litter out by Gunnison. He was the smallest, the one with the ear that wouldn't stand." He chuckled lightly. "She said he looked like trouble, so we named him Max. Short, simple, full of mischief." Jason leaned forward and extended the duck toy. Max took it gently, wagging his tail once, just once, then laid his head on Jason's knee, eyes blinking slowly. Lily watched from the doorway, unnoticed. "She didn't need much from him," Ethan continued. "Just his presence. He knew. Only 8 weeks old, but he knew she was hurting. Would lie beside her hospital bed, head on her hand. Wouldn't eat unless she smiled. And when she laughed, he barked once, just once, like he was agreeing with the world." His voice cracked, but he continued. "After she passed, the house wasn't a home anymore. Max would sleep on her side of the bed, nose pressed against her pillow like he was waiting. I tried to hold on, but..." He stopped, swallowing hard. "One morning, I took him for a walk. I remember the cold. I remember his leash in my hand. I don't remember hitting the ground." Lily stepped in then, quietly, her fingers resting lightly on the file. "You had a heart attack." Ethan nodded. "Massive one. Paramedics found me on the sidewalk. Max wouldn't leave me, barked until someone came out, sat beside me until the ambulance took me away." Jason asked, "Who took care of Max?" "My daughter, Rachel," Ethan said. "She lives in Fort Worth, flew in, dealt with everything. But she's got 2 kids, a full-time job. I guess Max was too much. I found out later. She gave him to a family nearby. Said they had kids, a yard. Thought it'd be good for him." Lily asked gently, "But they brought him here?" Ethan shrugged, bitter but not angry. "Too much energy, they said. Too sad. He wouldn't play, wouldn't eat, started tearing things up. 3 weeks later, he's tied to a post behind a church. No name, no collar. Max shifted his head, now resting against Ethan's boot. The old man reached down and scratched behind that one floppy ear. I never stopped looking, he whispered. Lily stepped closer. Let me scan him. I think there's a chip. Ethan gave a slow nod. The wind that afternoon was softer, gentler than the usual bite of winter in Crescent Falls. Outside the shelter, the clouds had thinned, revealing patches of golden sunlight that spilled across the valley like a second chance. Ethan sat at a wooden bench just beyond the parking lot, his coat zipped high and a woolen cap pulled down over his ears. Max lay curled at his feet, chin resting on Ethan's boot, one ear perked, the other lazily folded. Inside the shelter office, Lily Monroe was sitting at her desk, reviewing the intake forms that had once labeled Max as unclaimed. Now, she stared at Ethan's foster paperwork with a furrowed brow and a quiet determination. There was no policy for this kind of thing, not technically, but sometimes compassion had to lean ahead of rules. Earlier that day, Ethan had confessed what Lily already suspected. I want him back, he had said, voice low and gravelly, more than I can say. But I'm not the man I used to be. My health's not great, and my pension barely covers the basics. I can't afford grooming visits, or training, or even a regular vet if something happens. She had listened, leaning back in her chair with her arms crossed tightly, as if bracing herself against her own heart. Jason, sitting nearby with a box of colored pencils, had looked up and said quietly, "We could help." It was a simple idea, but it felt like sunlight breaking through. Now, Lily walked out to where Ethan and Max sat. Jason followed her, bundled in his red coat with the hood pulled halfway over his head. In his hand, he held a small wooden plaque, rough around the edges but lovingly painted. The words "Your Home" stood out in bright blue letters, with 2 tiny paw prints painted beneath. Ethan looked at it and blinked more times than necessary. "That for me?" he asked, voice barely above the breeze. "It's for Max," Jason said, "but I guess it's for both of you." They walked together to Ethan's modest home just outside town, a 2-bedroom cabin with pine shingles and a stone chimney. It stood on land he'd once shared with Nancy, tucked against the lower ridge and surrounded by quiet woods. The last few years had left it lonely, the porch unswept and flower beds empty. But today, something changed. Jason helped hang the sign near the door while Max sniffed the yard with cautious excitement. That evening, Lily stood in the doorway of the den, watching as Ethan settled into his old armchair with Max beside him. The room smelled faintly of wood smoke and old books. On the mantel above the fireplace, a photo of Nancy still sat in a silver frame. Max looked up at it once, then back at Ethan. "I'd forgotten how full a house feels when it breathes again," Ethan said. Lily smiled. "He knows he's home." The weeks that followed settled into a gentle rhythm. Lily and Jason visited twice a week, Jason bringing new toys or drawing pictures for Max to hang on the fridge. Lily helped Ethan with supplies, dog food deliveries, vet checkups, short walks on hard days. Max, for his part, seemed to understand Ethan's limitations instinctively. He didn't tug the leash or bark for attention. He would sit beside Ethan's chair on tired days and wait patiently for slower ones. And on good days, they went walking. One such day, just before sunset, Ethan led Max along the old deer trail that wrapped behind the ridge and climbed toward a small, grassy clearing overlooking the town. It was a place Nancy had loved. She used to bring a folding chair up there to read or sit silently with tea and watch the sun sink behind the hills. Ethan hadn't been back since she passed. Now, standing there, the last light bathing the valley in hues of gold and copper, Ethan lowered himself onto a flat rock, and Max sat beside him. The dog was quiet, his chest rising and falling in rhythm with Ethan's breath. After a long moment, Max rested his head gently on Ethan's shoulder, like he knew who used to sit there and how it used to feel. Ethan smiled faintly and whispered, "She would have loved you, you know. She did." Back in town, Lily launched a program she called Hearts and Paws, a shared responsibility initiative for senior citizens who wanted dogs but needed support. It started with Ethan, but soon others joined. Volunteers from the high school, retired nurses, even a local postal worker. Within months, it spread beyond Crescent Falls and was featured in a Denver news special. At the shelter, there were fewer lonely dogs, and in Ethan's house, fewer lonely days. Sometimes God doesn't send us angels with wings. He sends them with paws. Max wasn't just a dog. He was a vessel of love, loyalty, and healing. And Ethan, a man left alone by time and sorrow, found purpose again not through grand miracles, but through the quiet, persistent grace of connection. That's how God works. Not always in flashes of light, but in the soft steps of a faithful friend returning home. This story reminds us that no matter how broken life feels, there is always a road back. It might not look like the one we planned, but it will lead us to where we're needed, where we're loved, and where we can begin again. If you've ever felt alone, if you've ever questioned your place in this world, just remember, even a forgotten dog and a grieving man found their way home. Let this story be your reminder that God still works miracles, through second chances, through simple love, through the hearts of those who refuse to give up. If you believe in redemption, if you believe animals are part of God's plan, drop a comment below and type Amen. Share this story with someone who needs a little hope today. Tell us where you're watching from. We want to see how far this blessing travels. And if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button for more stories that will restore your faith. May God bless you, your loved ones, and every soul searching for home.